All it was a show, in my opinion. Look what we did. Coinbase and Kraken and all the other businesses, they're the bad guys. It is very simple. We did it. It was a plant.
In today's video, Attorney John Deaton discussed the latest with the SEC Ripple XRP lawsuit, and what's next for the procedural process, likelihood of a settlement soon.
Let's take the first question. Is the SEC streamlining platforms like Prometheum? Listen, the Prometheum thing, and that's what I'm going to call it, is one of the most suspicious things I've ever seen as far as regulation. How Promethean became this, got registered with the SEC in the middle of this crypto war is not a coincidence. And I tweeted out before a picture of a vending machine, and the vending machine was empty. That is the Promethean business model as it exists today, that they can sell some crypto digital asset securities, but they can't even sell Bitcoin. They can't sell Ethereum. They can't sell anything. All it was a show, in my opinion. Promethean went from April of 2021 as saying how we needed new regulation and we needed Congress to act, to all of a sudden being a Democratic witness at hearings saying, oh no, look what we did. Coinbase and Kraken and all the other businesses, they're the bad guys. It is very simple. We did it. It was a plant. And I believe that, and I'll believe it until it's proven otherwise. So yes, the SEC streamlined them for political reasons. Next question. What is holding back the pump on XRP? Well, everybody knows that's watching that John Deaton is not a financial market advisor. If you could look at my portfolio, you would know that I am no genius at timing the market. But I did say that, with that said, that Bitcoin drives this market. I tweeted that out. I also said before the XRP ruling that unless we're in a bull market with Bitcoin first leading the way, I never believed that XRP was going to break its all-time high. I did think it would go above $1, but that's just me, individual investor, no more better or sophisticated than you at picking stocks or picking crypto. But Bitcoin will lead the way, and then I believe XRP will actually outdo Bitcoin and ETH. That's my personal opinion. Please never invest based on my personal opinions, okay? Because then you're going to have a very red looking portfolio like I do right now. Okay, next question. If Judge Torres denies the SEC interlocutory appeal, is settlement more likely? As long as the Coinbase case is pending and the SEC is in this anti-crypto agenda, I don't believe that they can agree to a settlement. I know they don't want to go to trial against Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson because they're never going to prove that case. They're never going to prove recklessness. Understand that? Again, just so everybody knows that if Judge Rakoff, this is where we can use Judge Rakoff's opinion. If Judge Rakoff if the SEC in their last pleading said, look, these two sophisticated judges have a disagreement about something, about whether or not, crypto sold on exchanges can be securities, investment contracts. Well, if these two sophisticated judges are conflicted, how the hell is Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson going to be reckless in not knowing XRP was a security? So the SEC doesn't want to settle that case. I believe Judge Torres is going to deny the interlocutory appeal. And then I think that depending on what happens in the Coinbase case is going to dictate whether there's a settlement. As long as they're going after Coinbase and claiming that those 11 or 12 tokens are securities, how do they settle with XRP and Ripple? They can, but it's very difficult. You should assume that it's not going to happen. Next question. Can the government be sued for not going after ETH? The answer is no, not based on the way that you phrased the question. Selective enforcement is not a basis to go after, right? Here's the best example that I can give everyone. Remember, the question is, can we sue the SEC for not going after ETH, for not prosecuting ETH founders? And the answer is a resounding no. Bernie Madoff is the best example. The SEC was told multiple times that Bernie Madoff was running a Ponzi scheme. And there was evidence presented to the SEC like 5 times. Look, he's stealing people's money. It's a fraud. And the SEC did nothing. The SEC prosecuted Bernie Madoff after Bernie Madoff confessed. And a bunch of investors who lost money from Bernie Madoff, they sued the SEC. And they sued the SEC saying, look at that gross negligence by the SEC. We should be compensated. That's a pretty good argument one could make, right? Because trust me, we can all admit that the SEC intentionally turned a blind eye, if you will, to Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was on the short list to become SEC chairman. That's how effed up our system has become. But that case of Bernie Madoff investors suing the SEC was dismissed because the SEC is part of the executive branch, and it's up to the executive to make what's called discretionary decisions about who to sue and who not to sue. And a court can't then, because of separation of powers and things like that, can't go in and say, hey, you should have did this, you should have did that, if it involves discretion. And so those cases were dismissed. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be a case against individuals who used to be regulators and other individuals if you can prove a conspiracy to provide a regulatory advantage, a monopoly, so to speak. If you can prove that kind of evidence, then you can possibly get over the hurdle. So that's the answer. And we really need to push for that investigation into the decision of the speech and everything that went down, because I'm confident that there is enough evidence to potentially get past some of those hurdles. So you got to stand by. Next question. Can Ripple sell XRP directly abroad without U.S. legal problems after the Torres decision? Well, Ripple could sell XRP abroad before the Torres decision. So the answer to your question is yes, but there's a Supreme Court case called Morrison, which basically requires, in order for the SEC to have jurisdiction over a sale of a potential security, it has to be within the United States of America. That's the SEC. SEC governs the United States. So one of the major defenses that Ripple always had was that 95% of their sales are outside of the United States. Therefore, the SEC doesn't have jurisdiction. When you think about Japan, the United Kingdom, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Switzerland, and other jurisdictions that have declared, their regulatory agency has declared that XRP is not a security. So if Ripple or Brad Garlinghouse or anyone else sells XRP in Japan and it's not a security, how could that ever be considered illegal? So that's why also Ripple has been able to keep hiring during this crypto winter and been able to increase their market share, if you will, overseas because of that ability to sell XRP regardless of its regulatory status outside of the United States. Okay, next question. Can XRP holders sue Hinman and Clayton? Well, it's sort of related to that question that I answered already. You can't sue them for their discretionary functions because they have what's called qualified immunity and sovereign immunity. Think of a police officer. A police officer you can sue if they do intentional things, if there's malice involved, if there's evidence of some kind of criminal activity. But if a police officer arrests you and they're just negligent, right? They don't have probable cause, for example. They think they do, but they don't. And they falsely arrest you. You can sue the government, but you can't sue the cops individually because they would have what's called qualified immunity. They were acting within the scope of their duties and they didn't do anything intentional. And so a lot depends on evidence. Is there evidence that we can show that gets over the hurdle of immunity? I can tell you that Brad Garland, and there's also a standing issue. We'd have to be able to prove that we have standing to sue them. And that gets into a lot of complex legal issues, foreseeability, all kinds of things that I don't have time to get into right now. But I will tell you, when you think of standing, if there's a case against them, certainly Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, Chris Larson would have the most standing to bring a potential case if you can prove that there was a civil conspiracy to conspire to give a regulatory advantage to one group of small investors and punish another group. So there we go. Next question. Did I get the steak dinner from Charlie Gasparino yet? And the answer is no. Now, in all fairness, I have been on the road. I haven't been in New York. I went on vacation. I was in London with my daughters and in Portugal. I'm in DC. I'm going to Texas. But the answer is no. I do expect to collect one day, but I haven't collected. Does the SEC have unlimited money? How long can they? Well, that's why the SEC is good at one thing. The SEC is good at crushing new startups and innovation, because a small group of entrepreneurs, if they do fundraise, they raise funds, and let's say they raise those funds legally, most people can't say, well, we raised $10 million, but we need to save half of it for legal fees to fight the SEC. The SEC has a budget over $2 billion. I don't know how much the enforcement is, but Gary Gensler just went to the Congress and he says, give me more money. He even said, I'm doubling down on my crypto enforcement. I'm expanding the crypto unit. He's already expanded it twice. And because they have your and my taxpayer money. And so they use that and then they prosecute. And so they're also hiring lawyers. And so they do have unlimited sources when compared to small entrepreneurs. One of the things, ironically, a lot of people wanted Ripple to be prosecuted because of Ripple's pre-mine and all those things. And I say it is a blessing in disguise that Ripple was chosen. I know Ripple may feel differently. I know Brad and Chris may feel differently. But when you're looking at the crypto industry in general, it's a blessing, because how many other entities out there could withstand $100 to $200 million in legal fees? All right, just the discovery alone. And that's, the mistake, I guess, the SEC, they picked someone who was A, willing to fight back, and B, had the resources to fund the fight. If you don't have the money, you can't fight. And that's just the reality. And I've learned, because I've spoken to these entrepreneurs, and Library, Jeremy Kaufman is a perfect example. Jeremy Kaufman told me that he spent a couple $1 million in legal fees before the lawsuit, and they threatened to bankrupt him, if you remember all that. Then they filed a lawsuit after several years of investigation, and then you need to come up with another $5 million. And how many companies can do that? And so, but what we've learned is when you punch back, when you fight back, the SEC is not that great at fighting when you fight back. and we've demonstrated that.